The year is 1509. A young man, barely 18, steps into the throne room of England. He is King Henry VIII, the Golden Prince, the darling of Europe. Tall, athletic, and possessed of a ferocious intellect, Henry was everything a Renaissance monarch should be. Unlike his cautious father, Henry VII, this new king was a champion of chivalry, a gifted musician, and a theologian capable of debating cardinals. Henry's first act is to marry Catherine of Aragon, the widow of his deceased elder brother, Arthur. Catherine, daughter of the formidable Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain, brought prestige and alliance to the Tudor throne. For nearly 2 decades, their union was solid, but they failed to deliver the one thing Henry needed: a healthy, surviving son. The lack of a legitimate male heir became an obsession that consumed Henry's soul and led 2 women to the executioner's block. The man who began his reign as a popular patron of the arts ended it as a bloated, paranoid tyrant. Catherine was pious, intelligent, and strong-willed, enduring numerous miscarriages and stillbirths. Their only surviving child was the Princess Mary. By 1525, Catherine was 40, and hope for a son was fading. Henry feared that if he died without a clear male successor, England would plunge back into civil war. In this period of growing anxiety, Henry's theological mind began to find a terrifying justification for his misfortune. He had married Catherine under a papal dispensation because she had been his brother's wife. Henry began to pore over the book of Leviticus, specifically chapter 20, verse 21. If a man takes his brother's wife, it is an impurity. They shall be childless. He interpreted childless not as having no children, but as having no male children, no legitimate heirs. He convinced himself his marriage was cursed by God, and that his sons were being taken as divine punishment for defying Scripture. This personal conviction exploded into the defining political and religious crisis of the 16th century, the King's Great Matter. He tasked his chief minister, the powerful Cardinal Thomas Wolsey, with securing an annulment from Rome. The argument was simple. The original papal dispensation was invalid because God's law superseded the Pope's law. In 1527, Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor and Catherine's nephew, sacked Rome and held Pope Clement VII captive. The Pope dragged his feet for years, unwilling to anger the most powerful man in Europe, Charles V. Wolsey, unable to deliver the annulment, slowly lost the king's favor, paving the way for his eventual downfall. During this period, Henry's eye had fallen upon Anne Boleyn, a lady-in-waiting who had previously served Catherine. Anne was a woman of sharp wit, French sophistication, and deep-seated religious reformist leanings. She refused to become Henry's mistress, insisting she would only sleep with him as his wife. Henry's desire and conviction solidified. Anne was destined to be his queen and the mother of his sons. With Rome refusing the annulment, Henry's patience evaporated. Wolsey was dismissed in 1529. A new bolder guard rose around Henry, led by Thomas Cromwell and Thomas Cranmer, both of whom harbored evangelical sympathies. Cromwell, a genius of administration, engineered a series of parliamentary acts designed to dismantle the Pope's authority piece by piece. The final explosive step came in 1534 with the Act of Supremacy, declaring Henry the supreme head of the Church of England. This seismic shift, the English Reformation, was initiated not by theological revolution, but by a king's need for an annulment. Henry VIII was now free to resolve his own great matter. He had secretly married Anne Boleyn in January 1533. In May, Thomas Cranmer, the new Archbishop of Canterbury, declared Henry's marriage to Catherine null and void, and his marriage to Anne valid. Catherine, who never ceased to believe she was the true Queen of England, was sent away from court. Anne was crowned queen in a lavish ceremony in June 1533, pregnant with the future of the Tudor dynasty. The country held its breath, awaiting the prince that would secure the succession. In September 1533, Queen Anne gave birth. It was a girl, Elizabeth. The disappointment was palpable, but Henry was outwardly supportive, hoping the next child would be the promised son. Anne suffered a miscarriage of a son in 1534. A devastating loss of a clearly male child followed in January 1536. possibly after Henry was badly injured in a jousting accident. The sin, he rationalized, was his affair with Anne's sister, Mary Boleyn, years before. Henry needed Anne gone, and quickly. Henry, looking at his now 3-year-old daughter, decided again that God had cursed his marriage. Thomas Cromwell, the man who had installed Anne, was now tasked with her destruction. The charges were adultery, incest, and high treason. The evidence was ludicrously thin, largely based on hearsay and tortured confessions. The entire trial was a politically motivated sham. On May 19, 1536, Anne Boleyn, Queen of England and the catalyst for the English Reformation, walked to the scaffold. She knelt, and with a single stroke of a swordsman brought specially from Calais, the reign of the second queen ended. Within 11 days of Anne's execution, Henry married his third queen, Jane Seymour. Where Anne was fiery, intellectual, and challenging, Jane was meek, quiet, and conservative. She was everything the court expected. She wore the colors of Catherine of Aragon and attempted to gently bring Princess Mary back into Henry's favor. Jane Seymour's triumph came on October 12, 1537, when she gave birth to a healthy, legitimate male heir. The future King Edward VI had arrived. The king was ecstatic. Bells rang across England and celebrations lasted for days. Jane Seymour had given Henry what 2 marriages and a religious revolution had failed to procure. Tragically, the immense effort of childbirth proved fatal. 12 days after giving Henry his heart's desire, Queen Jane died of puerperal fever. Henry genuinely mourned her loss. She was the only one of his wives he would grant a queen's funeral. She was the only one buried beside him in St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle. Henry considered Jane his true wife because she had fulfilled her duty. She died a queen, not disgraced or divorced, but revered. For 2 years after Jane's death, Henry remained a widower, tending to his infant son and increasingly tormented by an old jousting injury. By 1539, Thomas Cromwell pushed for a new political marriage to Anne of Cleves, a German Protestant territory. The alliance was aimed at strengthening England against a potential Catholic coalition between France and the Holy Roman Empire. Hans Holbein the Younger, Henry's court painter, was dispatched to capture the young woman's likeness, returning with a flattering portrait. Henry, relying on this image and the political necessity, agreed to the match. When Anne arrived in England in January 1540, Henry paid her an incognito visit to surprise his bride. The moment was an unmitigated disaster. Henry, expecting the beauty of the portrait, found a woman whom he immediately deemed unattractive. "I like her not. I like her not," he is reported to have exclaimed to his courtiers. He was repulsed, claiming he was unable to consummate the union, citing a strange fear of his new wife. Within 6 months, the marriage was annulled on the grounds of non-consummation and a pre-contract. Anne, demonstrating remarkable intelligence, agreed to the annulment and was richly rewarded with vast estates. She was given the title of the King's beloved sister and lived out her days quietly in England, dying a natural death. For Thomas Cromwell, the debacle was fatal. His conservative opponents capitalized on the king's anger over the Cleves marriage. Cromwell was arrested and executed for heresy and treason in July 1540, adding another powerful victim to the king's temper. While the Cleves marriage was dissolving, Henry became enamored with Catherine Howard, a cousin of Anne Boleyn. She was a youthful, lively, and undeniably attractive girl, barely 19 years old. Henry, desperate to cling to his youth, was instantly revitalized. But Catherine was foolishly indiscreet and had a scandalous past, including affairs before her marriage. Tragically, she began an affair with Thomas Culpeper and even employed a former lover as her secretary. In 1541, while the king and queen were on a royal progress, Archbishop Cranmer delivered an anonymous letter detailing Catherine's misconduct. Henry, who had publicly given thanks to God just days earlier for his present felicity, reacted with volcanic rage and crushing despair. Derham and Culpeper were arrested and confessed to the affair. A queen who commits adultery undermines the royal succession, which is treason. Parliament passed an Act of Attainder, making it treasonous for any queen not to disclose her sexual history. On February 13, 1542, Catherine Howard was executed on the same spot as her cousin, Anne Boleyn. She was barely 20 years old. Henry, now morbidly obese and riddled with pain, hesitated before marrying a sixth time. In 1543, he chose Catherine Parr. Catherine Parr was a twice-widowed, intelligent woman of quiet Protestant sympathies. She married Henry for duty and influence. Her great achievement was unifying Henry's three children, Edward, Mary, and Elizabeth, securing their excellent education and place in the succession. She even survived an attempt by her enemies to accuse her of heresy, saving herself with an act of strategic submission and flattery. On January 28, 1547, King Henry VIII died at the age of 55. The man who had once been the epitome of Renaissance youth died a massive, isolated figure. He left a legacy of absolute power, having created the Church of England and the Royal Navy, irrevocably changing England's religious landscape. After the early death of his son, the throne passed to his daughters, finally to Elizabeth I, the child of the executed queen who ultimately secured the Golden Age. And there you have it, the epic, tragic saga of Henry VIII. A man whose desire for a son didn't just change the course of his life, but changed the course of England forever. He was a lover, a tyrant, a theologian, and a monster, all wrapped up in one massive, imposing historical figure. Which of Henry's queens do you think was treated the most unfairly? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Tudors, hit that like button. It genuinely helps History Narrated bring more stories like this to life. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another narrated journey through the greatest stories in history. We'll see you in the next chapter.